What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? The story of Mary Vincent always stands out to me. In 1978, 15-year-old Mary was hitchhiking. A man named Lawrence Singleton picked her up. He brutally raped her and eventually made her get out of the car. She planned to run, but he noticed and cut both her arms off. He threw her into a ditch and left her to die. She packed her stumps with mud to stop the bleeding and spent all night crawling out. She eventually makes it to the highway and starts walking, naked and covered in blood. The first car that saw her sped away in fear. The second car was a couple on their honeymoon. They picked her up and she survived. Edited to I was in a rush when I wrote this, so you should definitely read more into the story. It's crazy. From the horrific act itself, to the court proceedings, to the fact that he hardly served any time. What really upsets me most about this is that Singleton was released from jail for good behavior and went on to murder a different woman a few years later, Roxanne Hayes. I think in these scenarios we can safely say that if you can rape someone, chop their fucking arms off, and leave them to die, you aren't ever safe to be released. A headless, limbless torso was found in the bushes at the rest stop in the town where I grew up. They never found the rest of her body parts or the murderer. She wasn't even identified until about a decade later. She was a prostitute that had been estranged from her family. My mom's theory is that a truck driver from out of state did it, dismembered her, dumped her torso at the rest stop, and scattered the rest of her over state lines. Could have been an isolated incident, or it could be a serial killer. We might not ever know. This is gonna make this even creepier. There is a gas station in Odessa, Delaware, and kinda across from it is a small wooded area. Just down the road is a state police troop station. So back in the 90s I used to hit up this gas station every day on my way to and from work, 1 hour commute each way. One day I went to work, stopped, it was raining, and I had to park a bit from the store part and walk in. I got a flat and didn't realize it, but when I was pulling out some guy told me about the flat and to follow him. I told him no. I turned around and went back to the gas station and called my dad and waited in the station. Now here is the creepy part. A few months later they found a woman's torso in the woods across the way. They have never ever eyed her. She was even featured on one of the last episodes of America's Most Wanted. I could have been her. I think about it from time to time. If I had accepted help from this random guy, did he puncture my tire on purpose? All that stuff. My brother's ex-GF had 2 older sisters. They died before she was born. One day they decided to play hide and seek or something. So anyway, they both climbed inside a chest and accidentally locked themselves in. They suffocated. That is terrifying. It's particularly terrifying to me because I remember when I was younger something similar almost happened to me and my cousin. She had a daybed and we decided to get behind it and push it against the wall so we could play and nap in the dark. It got unbearably hot and we realized we couldn't breathe after about 30 minutes. If it wouldn't have also gotten so hot from our fear/body heat/lack of oxygen, we might have actually suffocated because we were getting lightheaded. It was scary, but eventually we pulled the bed away from the wall. I have no idea how that could happen on carpet. Bizarre freak accidents are just so strange. I'm truly sorry for you brother's ex-GF. I remember this poor kid who went missing while I was at Purdue. He was trying to come home to his dorm after a party and either wasn't able to get into the building or perhaps wanted to bypass the check-in desk. Just a guess, based on my experience as a student there, since he had been drinking. He entered the building through a door to an electrical closet that should have been locked and was electrocuted and killed that night. He was last seen January 13th and the body was discovered March 19th after reports of foul odors at the dorm. I remember talking with friends about theories of what happened when he went missing. How terrifying it must have been to find out there was a dead body in your dorm for months. I'll tell you one that happened to me, or rather, I was witness to. One night, I was out at a bar with a friend I was visiting in New Rochelle, New York. We went outside for a cigarette, and a car came flying past the bar. The car burned through a red light and started going up this hill that was on a curve. We watched as he veered over the double yellow and smashed head on with another car coming from the other direction. Both cars' hind ends lifted up, then slammed down. The car that was driving correctly burst into flames. I ran inside and grabbed the fire extinguisher, then yelled to the bartender to call 911 and say there has been an accident. My friend, a few other patrons, and me ran to the cars. Now, I used to think this was a fictional trope, but I was pretty drunk before this happened, and I swear it sobered me up instantly. I tried spraying the fire, but it did nothing. The fumes and heat were awful, and all we could do was stand back. The worst part was, and this will haunt me forever, was that the woman in the burning car was screaming as she died. My god, it was the worst sound ever. The fire department came and put the fire out. The police took us back to the bar and took statements. I found out the next day in the news that the car that was not speeding was being driven by a young woman coming home late from work. She was a block away from home, and I think she was either newly married or a new mother. The rotten motherfucker driving the other car was some rich drunk cocksucker. He lost a leg, but otherwise was physically unharmed. I have no clue if he did time, as I'll have to go back home a day or so later. I'm trying to find a link for the news story, but I can't, as this was maybe 6 or 7 years back. I remember it being reported on Lohudden Channel 12 News. In my town in the early 90s there was a notorious killer that had all of BC, Canada on watch. My wife's mother, years and years before I knew them, had been home alone while her husband was in England doing tree surgeon work, arborist. She was in her laundry room when a man walked up from her basement, completely scaring her. She freaked out and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" He said he was friends with her husband and was just coming to see if he was here. Apparently he told him he could just walk in, which she knew was bullshit. She was smart enough to tell him that he was just at the store and would be back any minute. He said he would wait outside for him. As soon as he left she called the police, but he was long gone by the time they got here. 2 weeks later, the killer was caught, his mugshot put on TV, and it was the guy in her house. An acquaintance of mine sent his son to triathlon camp in Lubbock, Texas. A week later, his son came back from camp. The next day, the son was complaining of a headache. 4 days later, he was dead. Healthy, happy, fit 12-year-old 1 week, dead the next. Turns out the lake had Neigleria fowleri, the brain-eating amoeba. Nothing scares me as irrationally as already being dead and waiting for your body to catch on. Edit. This was in 2007 in Lake LBJ. A 22-year-old died in the same lake 2 weeks later. Neigleria is terrifying to me. You can get it just from getting water up your nose swimming in a lake, or, I've heard but I'm too lazy to check, there have been people who got it from using an ET pot. This is a hometown story that stayed with me. It happened literally right around the corner from where I grew up, maybe a 2-minute drive away. Judy Kirby murdered 6 children and 1 adult by intentionally driving the wrong way on a divided highway in an attempt to commit suicide. She had been hospitalized for depression, but had also just ended a relationship with her ex-husband's brother and was by some reports involved in drug trafficking and fearing an imminent arrest. She picked up her sister's son, who was celebrating his 10th birthday that day. She then loaded her 3 children into the car, supposedly to pick up a gift for the nephew. Instead, she went missing with the carload of kids. A short time later, calls started coming into 911 about a car going the wrong way down the highway at a high rate of speed. They made it about 90 seconds before a head-on collision with another vehicle, driven by a father with 2 children and another child along for the ride. The crash annihilated both vehicles. The only survivors were Kirby herself and the child who was along for the ride in the other car. There were pieces of children all over the highway. She was sentenced to 215 years in prison. On September 20th, 1987 in Bellingham, Washington, a Georgia Pacific paper mill worker was sent to inspect a heat exchanger system in the steam plant. Inside the base of the stack, he spotted a charred skeleton. To this day, no one is certain who the victim was, how they wound up in such a horrible place, nor why. You know shit is real serious if the sentence starts with the complete date. The Lake Nyack disaster. The lake periodically belches a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide gas that suffocates everything within a 16-mile radius. In 1986, over 1,700 people and all their livestock died without even understanding what was happening to them. My science teacher in high school was in the Peace Corps and one of the first people to come across this village after it happened. He said it was so eerie because all the flies and mosquitoes had died and it was so silent. All the flies and mosquitoes had died. This scares me far more than the death of the people and livestock, because no matter where you go, you always expect for at least one fly or mosquito to be there. But to find even those things dead, my god. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.